Hey, welcome back. I'm Kathy Zalewski,
And I'm Kaila Henry.
and we are both realtors with Realty One Group Peak in Bozeman, Montana.
So today we wanted to talk about appraisals from the seller side. We've kind of done a little bit of this, but we really wanted to give a nice deep dive into the appraisal process and how it looks from the seller's perspective and probably from the buyer's perspective as well. But so kind of starting off with why do people get appraisals, right? Number one, it's going to be for finance deals. So
In most cases,
yes, I guess in most cases.
occasionally a cash buyer would have an appraisal, sometimes just confirm value, but generally speaking, appraisals are ordered when there's a lender involved.
Yeah. And what triggers it? So there can be a number of different things. So in our market, it is not uncommon, or I've had it somewhat frequently as of late specifically, to just get a waiver, meaning they don't actually need an appraisal. They're just for some reason not going to do that. So I think the things that we were talking about that trigger whether you get a waiver or what type of appraisal you get.
Well, right. Okay. So the lender is what necessitates the appraisal, because the lender, the bank, is taking risk on, and so they want to know the actual unadulterated value of a home. So there's two different ways that an appraisal can be done. One can be like replacement cost, and the other is market value, and those are kind of very different. Because replacement cost has to do a lot more with like cost of materials, obviously, versus market cost has to do with what other homes similar to it in a generalized area are selling for. Okay, so some of the things that to know about appraisals. First of all, it is kind of an inspection. The appraisal is going to come to your house and they're going to look at the condition of your property. They're going to take into consideration the location of your property, the amenities. So if you're in a specific neighborhood, let's say Black Bull, where there's a clubhouse and a swimming pool and membership,
Private golf course.
right? And membership is not even optional.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are things that appraisers consider, because a home in Black Bull is not the same as a home across the street in Middle Creek, where they do not have access to the clubhouse or the pool or the golf course necessarily.
Where I think, again, on the surface, someone might assume those are two very, very close locations, again, right across the street from each other. They have very nice homes in both of those subdivisions.
Right.
So, again, it could appear to be similar properties, but I think from an appraisal's view, there would not be.
Right. So amenities, and then an appraiser might also take into account like functional obsolescence. And by that I mean like floor plans that are really quirky, or a kind of a strange heating system, or really old electrical systems, things like that would
Knob and tube, old.
right, would like devalue the property, because this in essence the house has unusable electric.
Or it's more of a, I would say maybe for the knob and tube, it's more of a liability than it is
Right.
a benefit,
And-
right?
and
Obviously, having electric in your home is a benefit. However, when those systems are so dated,
and dangerous.
maybe not considered the same.
Right. So, and then of course they take into account like updates and upgrades that you've done. But I think so as a seller, and you're concerned or worried about how this appraisal is going to go, there's most of what will happen in the appraisal are not things that you can change, because that's what gives your house a value different than a house somewhere else. Again, location. The first rules in real estate. Appraisers also have they are licensed. They have to maintain continuing education, and so they have certain criteria that they have to look at in order to value your home.
And we are not appraisers, right?
Negative.
We are not appraisers, so we're not experts in this, but of course deal with it quite a bit.
Right.
Because we're adjacent to it.
And it benefits us as agents to have a good idea of how appraisers do their job, because ultimately whether the house sells or not for a certain number has to do with whether the appraiser
It can
looks
hinge
at it or
on
not.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if 30% of the deals in this valley are cash, 70% are financed in some way, and probably at least 80% of those 70% are going to have appraisals. So we really do have to know how an appraiser works. So, and again, I think we talked about this in pricing our home or pricing your home video. Location is kind of number one. Distance from town can dictate how much the property is worth. Distance to and from certain amenities or schools or hospitals, that can all change value. So an appraiser is going to look at that, and it very closely, kind of hand in hand, probably. Numbers 1 and 2 are that and condition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, when they come out to your property, they're not necessarily, although some appraisers do, flushing the toilets or running the water like an inspector would do, but they are looking at any items that deferred maintenance. They would certainly look at deferred maintenance type items. If your siding is peeling paint or falling off or just not there, they're gonna dock your value of your home for that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I think specifically can be really relevant for homes that are maybe under construction or being worked on. You really want to make sure that everything is complete when that appraiser comes. While it's not impossible for them to complete the appraisal, it will have conditions with it, and for us to close with that loan, those conditions need to be removed.
Right.
So it can certainly extend or alter timelines if those things aren't completed. So just really understanding that the appraiser really can halt a deal. They can really delay, stop, or alter the course of our timelines with our contracts.
So one thing to hit on is that not all appraisals are equal, and that by that I want to kind of draw it out. So an appraisal that you would have for a refinance, like if you're refinancing your home, or you want to get a HELOC, home equity line of credit, or you want to do a cash out refi where you're going to pay off your truck or something like that. Those appraisals are generally higher than a purchase appraisal. Several reasons for that. Generally, you've already got your mortgage, and if you're refining, you've already proved your validity in terms of being responsible in terms of your payments and so forth. The value of your property might have gone up since you purchased it 10 years ago, so the risk to the bank is less because you've proved yourself a good borrower, and there's more value in the home. Right.
Yep.
So that appraisal is a much different kind of thing than one for purchase, and especially when you're purchasing and that loan is dictating the appraisal. It depends on what kind of loan you're getting, how much money you're putting down. We see a lot of times conventional loans where people are putting 20, 30, 40, 50% down, that the appraisal will either be waived, as Kaila had mentioned, or they'll do a desktop appraisal, which means that they're not even going to come visit your house. They're just going to look at comparable sold properties to make sure that the value is at least,
close.
Right. Because the risk to the bank is so much less. If you're putting 50% of the value of your home or the purchase price of your home down, and you're only borrowing 50%, if you default, the bank is still going to make money by taking back that home and selling it. So that kind of appraisal, little less stringent perhaps, or like I said, where they're not even going to visit the house in person or physically visit the house. They instead will look at comps and take a look at the pictures and do that kind of thing.
Also something called a drive-by appraisal.
Yes.
Where they simply drive by, maybe they stop and take a look at the exterior some, but they're not really getting out and looking over things with fine-tooth a comb.
Right. Now, there are loan products out there that are called conventional loans where people are still only putting maybe 3, 5, or 10% down. While that's still a conventional loan appraisal, that appraiser might be making sure that he's holding the home or the value to a higher level, because it will be critiqued more strongly by the underwriters at the lending company.
And I think the thing is to really understand that the appraisal is another somewhat check that the lender puts in place to make sure that the money they are putting out for this property and the buyer that they are backing, they have some security in that because of this appraisal.
Right. So as a seller, you're sitting there and you're biting your fingernails over appraisal. So there's the loan, which we will have an idea of what kind of loan the buyer is getting when they present their offer. The loan heavily dictates the type of appraisal or the stringency of the appraisal.
And something I know when I first started, I'm like, well, what's the difference? Conventional, VA, FHA, whatever. Different loan programs really do matter. So it really is something when you are accepting that offer to really understand what you are accepting. And again, a great conversation to have with your realtor when you're going over the offer to really say, well, what is the, looks like they're getting financed with an FHA loan. What does that mean for me as a seller, right? In my property.
Right. Recently within our office, we had a colleague that had an appraiser come in and call out some repair items. Now that is
unusual.
It's definitely unusual for certainly for a conventional loan. However, certain loan products like a VA loan or Veterans Administration loan, those loans are, first of all, an appraiser has to be certified specifically to do a VA appraisal. Those appraisals stay with the house. I know it's at least 90 days. It might be 180 days. So that means even if you get a different buyer, if that buyer falls out, the valuation on that home is now set. So if you wanted more money than what the appraisal came back as, you're going to have to find a buyer that is willing to pay cash. But anyway, that the VA appraisals are a little bit different. VA appraisers also will be looking a lot more specifically, almost more like a home inspector. They're required by law and by their certification to make sure that the furnace works and that the AC works. They will also likely flush toilets. They will look under sinks for evidence of leaks that might indicate that there would be some kind of wood-eating insect infestation. Termite stuff.
Not too common out here.
Not common here.
But they are looking for it.
But they'll definitely look for mold or other things because that is 100% government-backed loan. Those loans usually, although a veteran using a VA loan certainly could put money down, they're usually 0% down loans. So the valuation of the house in comparison to the risk of the government giving the borrower the money for this house is very, very high. And then because it's also, I believe that this is only with veterans loans, but the health and safety aspect is super important because it's tied to the veterans' health and safety.
Well, and I know for an FHA property we sold out in Gallatin Canyon, and it was Gallatin Canyon, for those who don't know the area, can have some pretty old, weird cabin, kind of funky type homes. And we were fairly nervous about that appraisal because there was some weird stuff going on. And one of the conditions came back was that the sellers or the buyers, we had to figure out a resolution to it, but there needed to be handrails on the steps leading up and down from the house. Seems like a really small thing, right? Pretty inexpensive fix to do, but it did need to be done and in place prior to us being able to close that property.
Right.
So
most of those government-backed loans, the appraisers are going to hold a seller responsible for health and safety issues.
Yep. And even those small little, like a hand railing,
right?
Like seems small, but it's safety. That is a safety issue.
And they're not they are not inspectors, but I have had a FHA appraisal where on a railing, like going up the stairs, the banister things were too far apart, right?
I've heard of that.
So like a kid could stick their head through there and get stuck or whatever.
The balusters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard conversely where the banister was too wide, it was not grippable.
Oh.
So while there was a banister there, it was not wide or it was too wide for somebody to get a grip on it. So it didn't qualify. It can, again, there's a lot of weird little things, and we are not appraisers, so we don't know them all, but just keeping in mind what may be ahead.
So, seller, again, one of our favorite videos is prepping your home for sale. So not that you have to take out your tape measure and just measure everything in your banister, but be aware if you've got a railing on a deck and it has or you don't have a railing on a deck, I can tell you for sure we're going to have a problem. Kind of almost regardless what kind of buyer you have. If the deck's 10 feet in the air and it's got no railing, somebody's going to have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But different kinds of, there's a lot of different kinds of railings put on decks out here because they don't want to block the view. but they still have to be safe, right? They still have to be safe. So appraisals can be a little bit hairy. I think that in Montana, and definitely in the Bozeman area, it's rare that we have an appraisal issue over value. However, it is good to prepare your home and your head for the possibility that appraisal could come in low. And as a selling agent, I always I believe it's my job to meet the appraiser and give them the comps that we use to price your home, anything new that might have closed on the market, and also any other market information. It is your job as a seller to please provide me as your listing agent, or Kaila, with a list of any updates or upgrades that you've done that might not be readily apparent. For example, new furnace, water softeners, if you had the roof replaced in the last 10 years, if you've had a new septic system put in or something like that. All of those are things that an appraiser isn't going to do an investigation on to find out how old your septic system is. But if it's less than 5 years old, that's a value to the buyer, and that will help your appraisal. That will help your home have more value.
Yes, 100%. 100%. And so I know oftentimes my sellers are always really anxious to hear, like, well, when do we get to see that report? And just like the inspection report, you don't get to see it. It is not yours to see. Again, the buyer is paying for it either out of pocket or part of their closing costs. And so we don't get to see the report. The best news that we can get as sellers is really no news at all. That's what we want to hear, or at least hearing we're good to go on appraisal. We won't hear a number or see the report, but good news is just the value is there.
I had an appraisal, and this was actually a couple of weeks ago on a different property where the buyer was getting a bridge loan, and that is, in my mind, that's going to be a pretty stringent appraisal because they are lending the buyer money while they have not yet sold their previous house. So they are now committed to 2 homes. If both of those homes are million-ish, that's a lot of payment. So the bank is going to really want to make sure that if the buyer were to default on the loan, that the value is there. So that's another kind of interesting type of loan. But I just think, it had been like 10 days, so I called the bank and they're like, oh yeah, no problem. It's fine. It appraised at value. And I was like, okay, I'm sweating this.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. I feel like most often I don't hear anything.
Right.
I am having to make a call as the listing agent and be like, I haven't heard, an appraisal, because what I'm waiting to hear is an appraiser to call me and say, hey, Kaila, I'd love to get into 123 Main Street. I'm available these times. Can I go by?
Yes.
Right? That's the call I'm waiting to get as a listing agent so that we can know that, number one, their loan's progressing as it should be. So kind of, again, keeping tabs on those timelines in the background. So if I'm not getting that call a week or two after our inspection period, or let's say 3 to 5 weeks into our buy-sell or our contract, that's a flag that's going up in my mind. Well, what's going on with appraisal? Where are we at? And where do we need to be heading with that?
Yeah.
So
I think kind of to note, or maybe stepping back or sideways, when the appraiser is there, kind of treat it like an inspection. You don't necessarily have to be gone, but you definitely don't need to be following them around. One really important thing that appraisers do that also kind of can trigger an issue is they measure. They measure all the rooms in your house. And so if there's a big square footage discrepancy between what might be on the tax records and what the appraiser finds, usually there's going to be some discussion about it. That could benefit the buyer or not. We were talking at the office this week about a home where like half the basement was garage, but it had just been added into the square footage, so that's not really living space square footage, and if it's not heated and cooled and not livable, then it's not really as valuable. So if it was a 3,000 square foot house and 850 feet of that were actually garage, that can make a big difference.
That can change your value for sure.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that goes into it, and again, a lot of it kind of is behind the scenes, and we don't say any of this to stress you out. We just want to try and help inform, right? I think the more information you have, the better you can understand some of the processes. and what it takes to get a house sold, and why, again, we're so keen on getting a listing price that we do feel really confident about, because there is still this hurdle, and oftentimes an appraisal won't happen until the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th week of a contract.
Yeah.
That's late in a contract. It's not exactly, you maybe already have moving plans scheduled and everything like that. You don't want to be surprised by something that, and sometimes you might be.
Right.
But
and the appraiser is not there is not making his valuation based on how pretty your home is. So if there's boxes all over the place because they're not coming and you're 10 days out from moving, that's fine. No big whoop. But I do think it's important to make sure that the appraiser is granted access pretty readily. So try and cooperate when that appraisal, when I give you a call and say, hey, the appraiser wants to come Tuesday at 10. Is that okay? It's not great to push it off just because that prolongs any anxiety or doubt that I might have. Probably not you. It's probably me. But I think appraisals. It's not an issue that we can't get over. Even if there's some kind of financial gap between what the offer was and what the appraisal comes in at, normally that kind of stuff can be worked out.
In a number of different ways, right? Deal can fall apart.
Yeah.
You can negotiate with the seller or with the buyer, right? You guys can work some sort of split the difference, or someone will, decrease by this much and someone will come out of pocket this much. Lots of different ways to, I would say potentially work with it. Just kind of have to cross that bridge if or when you get there.
Yeah.
Keep in mind too that, again, appraisers, they are licensed and insured professionals, so they can beat your property by yourself, and they're unbiased, so they are not there to try and kill the deal or to protect the buyer or anything along those lines. How the appraiser gets chosen is a lender will order it. The lender will work on their file and they'll say, okay, we do need an appraiser for this one. They order the appraiser and then it goes into a pool. And there's just a pool of requests for appraisals in our area, and then the local folks, the appraisers, can go by and choose which ones they want to do.
Right.
So again, getting that process started early can be beneficial because you don't want it sitting in that pool for too long, because that can delay our timeline.
Right.
But keeping in mind that it's really not even the buyer hiring the appraiser. They have no idea who that person is. The lender doesn't get to pick. We don't get to pick. It is random.
Right.
So.
Exactly. And so again, that just confirms that it's unbiased.
Yeah.
And that is not the way it used to work, so we are glad it works that way now. Yeah. So that's great.
Yeah.
So I think is that pretty much it?
That's it, unless you want to talk about Tidewater specifically. I know you talked about VA loans a little bit.
Right.
That period where you can...
Yeah. So we'll probably do a separate video on VA loans because they are a little bit different. But a Tidewater is in using a VA loan. A Tidewater is what's issued if the appraiser is finding the value is not what the purchase price is going to be, and so then they notify the selling agent, and then I get the opportunity to go back and provide them with more comps or more information to help bring up the value so that it can match what the purchase price is.
It's essentially a period of time for you to help the appraiser see what you saw on the property.
Right. It's a notice, and then I get the opportunity to do that. Yeah. It usually, I think it does have like a 10-day expiration period or something like that. So it's there to help move the process along and ensure that the best possible value for the home is where we end up.
Yeah.
So that's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity.
Yeah. And I'll just say, been practicing real estate in Montana for 8 years. I've never heard of that term before Kathy told me. So I don't know how common it is in our area, but there's certainly VA loans.
Yeah.
And I think it could absolutely be a thing.
Yeah.
So just, it's always good to be learning and surrounding yourself with experts and good colleagues.
Well, years of experience. But,
but that's to me the cool thing is that I've never heard of that before you.
Well.
And always cool to be learning. And because again, I'm sure at some point it'll come up, and now at least I'm I've heard of it.
Yes.
And I know what it is. So
well, and it's time for you to, get on it. But so we will probably follow up with another separate video on VA loans and how those kind of work. So you can stay tuned for that if that's something that you think you might use as a buyer. And certainly sellers know about it as well. Again, not that VA loans are bad, they're not, and thank you for your service, but it does create a little bit different dynamic in terms of the appraisals and inspections.
They are really great loan products for for, I would say, people that qualify for them and that makes sense, right? There's a loan product for everyone, and just kind of find what's best for you.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think that's it.
Yep. Thank you so much for hanging in there. And if you've got any questions, definitely put them in the comments. Please subscribe and like our channel, and we will see you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks.